So, who hasn't got their name up on the board? Because at the moment there's 23 and there should be more than that, shouldn't there? Yeah. I've asked Nicole's put her name up. Amanda will be coming in today. Is there anyone else? I think she's busy.
What's she doing?
But she was thinking of coming, and she just had her baby, yes. So what would be great is if we can have a couple of people from Friday brave enough, or one person from Friday brave enough to transfer across to Wednesday. Sorry? You duck under because you're not brave enough. Great. It's just we want to make sure you've got a couple of people to teach to. Okay, so the people will be giving you feedback again. Your fellow students will be giving you feedback. And can you remember what we did last segment? And a lot of it was a bit ad hoc, but what feedback do you want from your fellow students? And what question are you going to ask that will elicit that feedback? So how do you, and remember we talked about it last time, do you ask a question that's a yes-no answer? Or do you find a way of asking a question that elicits more information? Where this is really important is not just in getting information and feedback from each other, but for your clients. How do you develop questions that begin to elicit more information from them? No? And it's a skill that needs to be practiced. So, these are just more approximations of that. No? This ability to ask a question, to think about what's the question I'm asking to get the information that I'm actually interested in. And of course, the precursor of that is you have to decide what is the thing that you want to get information from, that you think other people could give you good information about. Yeah? So that's your first thing, so that before your lesson you're really clear on what you want them to give you feedback on. And then the second part is, and we've talked about this a little bit before too, could you be able to discuss with them after the lesson what your intentions were in the lesson in terms of what you wanted them to learn about learning. So not necessarily about the movement or what they were doing, but what you wanted them to learn about themselves as a learner. Did you have a foreground there that you were a little bit more interested? You thought that particular lesson would evoke something about what they could learn about themselves as a learner. And the second part is, what do you think this could evoke in terms of movement organisation, in terms of functional movement? What could they specifically learn from the lesson that you're going to teach? And you can put that into a bigger thing. So there's the movement. So, the lesson yesterday, what do you think you could say you had the opportunity to learn from the first lesson we did yesterday? The one where you were on your side. That your middle could be more the initiator. Yeah. Yeah. And there's your function, walking. You know, that there was something about that counter rotation that could make walking easier. Is there anything else? Because there's many things you can pull out of a lesson. Because these are the questions you need to start asking yourselves. Because, you know, for the first, as I said, especially the first year, we just immerse you in ATM. We don't want you to think too much. We don't want you to get in the way, if you like. Self-image is everything. No? So maybe after a lesson like that, how was my self-image extended or expanded? And that includes the psychology. Something about the centre being more available for movement. So when you do an ATM, you know, really spend time at the end of the ATM. What's different for me? And of course, it's only your experience, but it's a big indicator. What's different for me? What are the things that I could suggest to people that's that bigger picture of what may have happened in their self-image? Did you want to say something?
When you said it's okay, something I was thinking when I was teaching the other day is trying to get across the idea that it's okay not to know or to have to understand it necessarily. That's an okay place to be. That's, for me, that's sometimes a place I really think
And that's where it gets interesting, because you do, you know, it's that state when you get up at the end of a lesson that something's really different. Yeah? Learning, though, is about making distinctions as well. You know, it's about having something that you can recognize. So this is really different. Maybe I don't like this place, but what's different? What is it that, you know, is it that I feel more closed in? Is it that somehow like this I don't feel able to move out in the world, or it's just something really unfamiliar? Yeah? And I'm not saying we want our clients to be brought to that level of language, but for you as practitioners to begin to be able to pull out a little bit more, or you know, all that rotation, has it opened up my something in the space around me somehow? Yeah? What's the difference? And so, as I said, not just in the mechanics of the skeleton necessarily, but what's happened in the bigger self-image as well. I think it's the same thing, Carol. You know, if I said to you, how will I put this? Self-image, we have a very particular definition of self-image in a way. Huh? So if you're going to talk about that, you probably need to talk to them about what do we mean by self-image, or have a discussion about what is self-image for people. What does it encapsulate? And again, you know, for us, it's the thinking, the feeling, the sensing, and the doing, but they're all intricately, you know. So if someone feels, if you don't mind me using you as an example, Glenn goes, oh, I don't really like the feeling. How's he organising that he doesn't like that feeling? What's it to do with the organisation of himself in space and within himself? So it's getting that clarity, if you like, about what we mean. Yeah. And again, this is first approximations, just to, again, start you thinking, well, what would I like to bring more foreground in terms of learning to learn in the lesson? What is the movement that I think, the function that I think this is improving? Huh? So it wouldn't make sense after a lesson like we did yesterday with the turning to really do see what it's like to bend down to the floor. I'm not saying that wouldn't be easier if more of them are involved in the action, because once you get more of them involved in an action, everything should be easier. But in terms of that particular movement, what do you think would most likely let them feel a difference? Okay. Okay, so one more thing for you to think about. I'll try not to bombard you with everything. Next week, when you do the practicum, I just want you again, this is your first approximations, you're all going to write out your own individual feedback form for your group that you'll be teaching, so that you can again think about, okay, I've thought about the feedback I want from my colleagues. What feedback do I think it would be useful to get from the general public about my teaching? And how, again, do you phrase those questions that are useful to you? Yeah? Useful to you for your learning. That'd be sort of the focus that I'd be thinking of. If you also think, oh, I'd like to make it useful for their learning, that's fine. But I want you to mainly first think, what would be useful for my learning as an ATM teacher? Okay, now you're all looking like stunned mullets. We'll go on and do something to embody you again. Have a stand.